Welcome, welcome, welcome to Hermetically Speaking with your vessel, Toria, transmitting alchemy, mystic psychology, and channeled messaging for all of our days. Here, we explore the sacred, the shadow, and the infinite spiral path of awakening so you can remember who you are beneath the programming and rebuild yourself from the inside out. And as always, go back to episode 1 for my disclaimers on mystic psychology and the fact that I am not a medical professional, and everything I speak on is through experience and an energetic standpoint rooted in the ancient wisdom of Hermeticism. Therefore, if you are seeking medical advice of any kind, please consult a licensed professional. All right, welcome back to episode 17 of Hermetically Speaking with myself, Toria. We are always transmitting some mystic psychology and divine alchemy for your soul's evolution. And I feel like I started the last podcast out this way with this episode, maybe the most personal one I've shared to date. So, like Eminem said, coming out of the closet, y'all. And it may also be one of the most necessary ones. I don't always pick the timeline, at least my ego doesn't. So my higher self said, this is it, and so we're going to run with this. So for all of us walking the path of healing, awakening, and remembering, we've all struggled with mental illnesses and various mental diagnoses, more than likely. It's normal, right? It's completely normal nowadays. And today, we are rethinking everything that we have been told about a small portion of mental illnesses. Specifically, dissociative identity disorder, also called DID, and it used to be called multiple personality disorder, referred to as MPD, and schizophrenia, right? We're going to have a trifecta here today. And we're going to question whether these are truly separate things or if they're just different expressions of the same root. Trauma, right? So, of course, disclaimers at the beginning of the podcast, but we're just going to make this one extra special. This episode is not medical advice. I, Toria, am not a licensed psychologist, psychiatrist, or a medical professional of any kind. The only thing I've got is an entrepreneurship certificate and some specialized licensing, and it has nothing to do with the medical field or the psychological field. So, I am a vessel who has lived through the depths of this experience. I have danced with these diagnoses. I have broken under their weight. I have heard the voices, felt the splits, and I have returned again and again to find the divine thread underneath it all. This is what mystic psychology is about, y'all. This is what it is to be a hermeticist, an unveil what is unseen in the psyche and in the mind of the psyche. Because we say psyche like it means psychological or psychology, which, yeah, cool, it does, but it also means the soul. So today, I'm going to tell you what I've learned, not from textbooks, but from the inside out, from the channeling, from the downloads, and from the first lived experience as I know it. So, before trauma, there are roles. We all have them. These are not pathological. These are the natural facets of human beings. You might have had, and most likely had, an inner child who loved to play and dream. Let's hope you had. A protector part who stood up when things felt unsafe. A performer, a caregiver, a spiritual one, a wild one, a quiet one, right? This list kind of goes on. These are just to name a few. And these natural facets of your human being self, these parts, they were your internal cast, your constellation of the self. They helped you move through life. And so now we're going to break this down even more to a summary and parallel, starting with how old you are now. So, how old are you? Get that in your head. and then just take the few parts I mentioned above, right? I believe that's seven parts that I mentioned above, and multiply 7 times however old you are. And this is just a baseline example, mind you. So I have, I use 35 as an example. I'm not 35, but it just, when I was writing this script and kind of going through everything, I chose that number. So 35 times 7 is 245, right? That's a lot of parts. That's a lot of parts, because the theory and the understanding is, every year we're growing. And so we can divide it down to even the day, if we really wanted to, right? Like 35 times 365. Maybe let's not go that far. That's a little bit overwhelming, and it doesn't break down what I want to break down in a fluid manner, like I'm trying to provide it to you. So we have each year of our lives, and whichever ones experience trauma or even over exuberant joy, because yes, that can cause splits too, but we're going to stay on this train track today. That was something I wanted to mention, because it's like, holy crap, like nobody realizes like both of these can cause splits in the psyche. Mind, psyche, both, in the being. So now so you have the number 245, right? So at the age of 35, just with the 7 parts that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, which we're not very far into, so we're still in the beginning technically. So say that 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, you experience traumas that you can specifically pinpoint, or maybe one ongoing trauma. And now take that number of parts again and divide them even more so. So, and when I say divide, I meant like it's a play on words kind of, because we're literally dividing our parts in the sense that we have to multiply them. So if you take those 5 years, 17 to 21, and you times it by the 245, I really messed up the math there, didn't I? I got 1,225. So it technically should have been, this is fun. It technically should have been, if we take 21 times 7, that's going to be 147. So then we have 147 parts by the time we're 21. I should have stayed with the age of 35, not the, nope. Nope, I apologize. Okay, yep, let me just squirrel. We're going to go back. This is going to be a totally unedited episode. I don't do a lot of edits, but you're going to see my frazzled moment, right? So if you're 35 years old and your trauma happened between 17 and 21, you're going to take 245 parts and you're going to times it by those 5 years of trauma. And that's 1,225. That's how many parts you could possibly have, right? Like not possibly, like it's an infinite number, right? But that gives you a general idea of how many parts you might have had develop, split off, go into exile, all of these different things. And while it seems extremely excessive, if we really understand that we ourselves are a universe within ourselves, which is why I switched my YouTube home channel to A Spiritual World, is because that's what each one of us individually are. Having 1,225 parts really is actually quite understandable. We have over tens of thousands of veins alone in the body. That's not counting bones, cells, muscular structure, nerves, etc. So in reality and understandability, having over 1,000 parts kind of aligns even, right? Like it's like, well, that makes sense. And now there are always variations, as each one of us are created uniquely. Every year you grow and your parts change, and some grow in fluidity of health, compassion, security, and safety. So they may not alter in a way that, air quotes here, negatively affects us. So maybe some parts don't transform or split off as much as others do. That division within the psyche. So trauma absolutely creates this division from our other parts, without a doubt. However, the parts created in division were once the original parts. So again, if you grew up in safety, you probably have, everybody has it, the programming, right? We have the programming of society, and we have to perform to achieve, we have to, people please and all of these things, but you might not have, but that's like a consistent part of you that has kind of, seamlessly grown through. So that part from age 0 up to 35 might not have a whole lot of transgression, whereas someone that's hit trauma and, other experiences, which a lot of society has, those parts, then start to splinter off. And trauma never erases the original role of the part in question. It either cuts them off completely and disconnects it, which it can do, but it also mutates it in a sense. And that's where I get the word exile from. And so some get buried so deep that you forget that part even exists, right? It's like what we bury grows. And according to IFS, which is Integrated Family Systems, which is a wonderful psychological avenue for healing, and it is where I got the term exiles from. And it is a successful therapeutic recovery avenue, and they become exiled and hidden away by these other parts of you, which are called protectors and managers. So others get amplified to the point of taking over to protect you, right? Like that's what we say our ego does. We say it's our ego's fault. Like our ego is the one that da 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 da. But these are parts of our ego that we can help dissect and really understand, because our ego isn't just one thing. It has parts as well, right? Like every part has parts and so on and so forth. I mean, if we are living in an infinite universe and we are infinite beings, who's to say that, we're not infinite? So others might get amplified to the point of taking over, which is what I said about the protectors and the managers. They tend to try to take over and they void other parts out to keep us safe, right? Like something was too intense for us to handle. We can never handle or measure that again. It's, so others shatter into fragments because holding one emotion became too unbearable. Or maybe maybe a part of you didn't agree with itself, and it shattered from itself, right? Like that's possible too. So the splitting doesn't begin from zero. It begins from the complexity that already existed. That's where we often get this layered, confusing experience of DID or MPD. It's trauma layered over an already developed internal system. And the system malfunctions, not because it was broken, but because it was overloaded. And realistically, we develop more parts as we grow. So that 35 times 7 is unrealistic, because at the age of 1, you have X amount of parts. Then at the age of 2, you have X plus X amount of parts. And in the age of 3, you have X plus X plus S amount of parts. And then any trauma experienced, some of those parts or all of them split off, and so on and so on. Sorry, I hit my watch. You literally have an infinite number of parts in your psyche. The soul, which also correlates with the mind that creates consciousness and how we are here in the first place. We are truly infinite beings. Like I said, truly, truly, truly infinite beings, and creation never ceases within us and therefore around us. So let's take a second to break down the 3 main diagnoses of focus for today's episode, because if you're not familiar with them and you're looking at this episode as intuitive purposes or informational purposes, I highly recommend, because these diagnoses actually have a more prevalent occurrence in today's society and in individuals today than I think people realize. And that's kind of what I want to bring awareness to. So multiple personality disorder, which is now considered an obsolete diagnosis, is referred to the presence of, or was referred to the presence of, seemingly distinct people inside one body. So different personalities that are altered, and some with different names, some with different ages, some with different memories, right? And so then dissociative identity disorder, which is now the current term for MPD, it focuses not on separate people, but on identity states that are disassociated parts of one person who have split off to carry trauma, protect the system, or hold emotions. I was speaking to someone that is on this journey with me and that I value very greatly, and we were talking about this, and it was like, what if DID is different parts of the soul living different timelines? And so, that's a whole hack thing, right? Like we're going to go down that rabbit hole at some point. So, and then there's schizophrenia, which is definitely misunderstood. Schizophrenia is classified as a chronic and severe mental disorder that affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. It is categorized as a psychotic disorder and is typically characterized by a disconnection from reality, often referred to as a psychosis. And in my personal experience, schizophrenia was like the veil collapsing. There were voices, visions, messages, and not all of them felt like they were mine at the time. However, in retrospect, I see now they were a lot of them. They just were. And they served me to teach me about such things to be unveiled and understood. At the time, though, it felt like the entire world of Earth was literally bleeding into me. Like I could see the past, present, the future. I could see what was to come. And I didn't really know what I was seeing. And sometimes it wasn't a part taking over. It was a message or multiples. And I could, and definitely did, suffocate under the weight of information that was just being pummeled at me. And so I'd like to take a moment to input a little bit more of my own personal awareness that schizophrenia can be both a spiritual tap-in and a modern-day psychological issue that evades therapists and specialists, right? Like, I am not somebody that believes in a finite reality. So I don't want to say that schizophrenia is... I think everything is spiritual. I believe that everything is spiritual, and I'm so sorry these dogs are running around like crazy, and I just really wish that I could lock them out of the house, but we have a doggy door, and we should have not gotten one. No, I'm just kidding. So anyways, I don't... Finite statements go against the grain of who I am, because I believe that we live in an infinite reality. And so we are going to continue to unveil psychology in new ways, right? Like schizophrenia, all of these disorders and diagnoses and everything like that. So everything that I say is subject to change and expansion. And we have to unveil these layers to get to other layers, right? Like, or at least that's what I'm here doing today. And this is how I know to move forward and tap more into mystic psychology and really be able to understand what it is that spirit is teaching me. And so I think that we will see a better understanding in the future once we invite the two components to blend and stop looking at individuals with schizophrenia or any diagnoses whatsoever that they can't be helped, that they have to be medicated forever, and that there is just no cure or recovery or rehabilitation, or that they are in any way non-functioning, which is what this episode is all about. I mean, really, what if the DSM-5 is just the various layers through consciousness that the soul has come here to experience? And, you know, the DSM-5 gives a lot of like finite descriptions on diagnoses. And I'm just going to take a break here for a second and come back. All right. Thanks, guys. Obviously I wasn't gone too long on the podcast, and I got the dogs to calm down. So anyways, we were at an interesting and inquisitory thought, right? So what if the DSM-5 is just the various layers through consciousness that the soul has come here to experience, and everything in the DSM-5 is connected and weaved together? It's a tree, it's branches, it's roots, it's everything, right? And that's how I look at it. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a medical professional, but I do know that mystic psychology is definitely in my soul, and everything at this time being that I am here to understand. I help clients heal their, you know, mental and emotional anguish through the mind. And I love doing it. It's truly a passion, because I believe that each of us has the ability to heal anything that riddles us. And I hope to prove that to the world. Even if I don't get to see it proven to the world, you know, this is what I know. This is what I know I'm here for at this time. So let's bring this back into better focus and take a moment to really clarify something, because this is where the misunderstanding often begins. DID and MPD are not the same thing. even though the DSM-5 chose to replace one with the other, in my experience and in the experiences of many others, these are not redundant. They are relational. They are part of the same spectrum, not interchangeable labels. DID tends to be what happens when trauma fragments the mind into dissociated identity states. Often the person doesn't remember switching. And while DID is not something that I have had the experience of personally, I do know someone on a personal level that does have this diagnosis and that very much does experience it. And one thing I have yet to really ask them, but what intuition guides me into, is that they're in a disassociated state when they are in this other identity. And switching back and forth between these identities, there's amnesia, there's time loss, and there's disconnection. And the parts may or may not be aware of each other. I think underneath, they're completely aware of each other, but consciously, egoically, understandably, in what we have tangible evidence for, they're not. And it's a system designed to survive by dividing up the pain. And so MPD, on the other hand, is when those identity states crystallize into fully developed personas. They may have names, voices, distinct memories, and entire emotional worlds of their own. And sometimes they are aware of each other. Sometimes they're not. And I think this is kind of where psychology doesn't realize they kind of maybe went, I don't want to use the word wrong, but that they could have expanded on it. Because the key difference is that in MPD, these parts often feel like entirely separate selves rather than just fragments. It can be disassociation in some regards, yes, because if those parts of you are still riddled in trauma, then yes, they're most likely disassociating. But with an archetypal solidity that doesn't always show up in DID. So here's the thing. DID should have been added to MPD, or in addition to it, not used to replace it. It should have been recognized as a layer within MPD, or an expansion of it, a deepening, a refinement, an additional path the psyche can take in response to trauma, another symptom. And what I believe psychology was doing, again, without realizing it, was dissecting MPD from a new angle, trying to name the severity or structure of how someone switches, how much they remember, how co-conscious they are, and how integrated or fragmented their parts feel. And instead of keeping MPD as the umbrella and adding DID as a spectrum within it, they flipped it. They erased a truth in order to simplify the language. And in reality, it made it a problem, because in doing so, we lost part of the story. We lost the people whose experiences don't neatly fit into the DID criteria, but who do live with the embodied reality of multiple selves. And we also diminished the nuance that both systems offer us when it comes to understanding how trauma truly fragments the human experience. To me, these two aren't either or. They are expressions of the same root trauma system, manifesting at different energetic thresholds, dependent on the age, intensity, and frequency of the traumas, the spiritual sensitivity of the individual, and the support or lack thereof around them during the experiences. And so I'll say it plainly here. DID is what I feel is a hardcore fragmentation. And MPD is an embodiment of a fragmentation, but maybe one that isn't as hardcore. But I also want to say that MPD can happen without a fragmentation in a sense. Maybe it's more like a fractal, where it looks like a fragment, but it's really part of a better whole, because that's what everything is we look at things as fragments and fractals, but everything is really a whole. We just don't have the whole picture or the whole understanding right now. And so both deserve to be acknowledged, clinically, spiritually, and communally. Because when we erase diagnoses, we erase the people who needed that language to survive. And in this space, we don't erase, we reclaim. And So here's another thing I want to bring into this conversation, because it's a form of validation that modern psychology already has, but doesn't fully realize. And that's this IFS system, this internal family systems therapy that I spoke of earlier. IFS is built on the premise that every person has internal parts, right? Like we talked about these parts, having over 1,000 parts, right? Not in a disordered way though. IFS talks about it as a natural structure of the psyche, which is how we touched on it at the beginning as well. But then what happens when it, when trauma happens and it splinters off and all of these things. Again, there's that IFS specifically focuses on the inner child, the manager, the exile, the protector, and the firefighter. And these aren't metaphorical. They are real, energetic, and psychological roles that show up with distinct emotions, beliefs, voices, and even bodily sensations. My firefighters were so raw back in the day when I was in my trauma and in my survival mode on a 100% basis, that my firefighters would burn the house down to get me out. Like that's how extreme my firefighters were. And so I know these characteristics or these, internal parts, and I also know how much control they can have over other parts that I didn't understand existed. So if we accept that in everyday people without a diagnosis have all of these different parts, right? Like we're talking about an inner child here. I have an inner child. I have an inner adolescent. I have an inner tweenie, right? Like 20s, right? And I have an inner 30 go-getter. And so I'm not to 40 yet, so I'm not there. But I have just these different decades broken up of like a circumference explanation of these parts, right? And I know that my inner child has a different personality than I have as an inner 30, or even as an you want to talk about inner child and inner adolescence. That's like, whoo, somebody flipped a switch. That's all I got to say. Somebody flipped a switch, and they are the opposites of each other. So if we can accept that and understand this IFS system and accept that people without a diagnosis, I mean, most people that find IFS have some sort of diagnosis, right? Depression, bipolar, borderline, whatever it may be, who cares, right? Your diagnosis is not your identity. It is not even a part of you. It is a symptom of how you handle the stress of the economy and society and trauma and who you are. And so my real question comes down to, why do we discredit it when those parts become more defined? They become louder. They become more embodied in someone with trauma. To me, this is a direct correlation and exactly what multiple personality disorder speaks to. Except for multiple personality disorder is probably more prevalent in the sense of, again, the trauma was so extreme. And so these parts, and this is pretty much how I experienced it. I mean, it's very difficult to explain how I experienced it because there's so much to it. But to break it down in a very simplistic term, the different parts of me, the different ages of me, the different personalities within me, some before traumas, some after traumas, some in the middle of traumas, some with trauma, screaming, singing, and trying to basically get my attention in my mind. And so I think that's where, they're different levels, they're different layers of what trauma can happen to us and what spiritual breakthroughs can do. And so, yeah, IFS is maybe when we're not so riddled with trauma, and MPD is, we got some trauma. We got it. And it's getting louder than any of our other parts. And then you got DID, which completely, is the same thing, but it splits it off and separates someone in such an extreme way that these parts don't even feel connected to themselves. But in MPD, when I experienced it, I know that my parts were still connected, even though they felt eons apart. And then I worked very, very hardly and I was able to bring them back together. And now they're softer, now they're gentler. But I do, like, as an individual human, I am the queen, right? Like, I am the queen of my home. My boyfriend calls me princess, and I told him the other day, I said, you need to upgrade me to queen, right? Like, and we were joking about something, specific, and it, of course he, you're upgraded. However, but then I have these other parts of me, like I am a tomboy, like, right? Like, I can spit, I can run, I can play street hockey, I can climb trees. Like, I'm a multifaceted human being. I am a multidimensional human being. So if we're multifaceted, that really speaks to MPD and all of these other things. And psychology just doesn't have the breakthrough that it needs because it only holds on to tangible evidence and not the intangible. So IFS is essentially the gentle version of MPD. It's less extreme, less stigmatized, but fundamentally the same map. I think IFS really gives us a baseline map, and it proves that the mind fragments as a survival response, but also that maybe it doesn't need a survival response to fragment, that these parts within us, they are their own individual selves inside of ourself, right? Like Mars, Mercury, Uranus, all of them, they're all different planets inside the universe, right? And like, so my understanding, if I really broke down all of my parts, some of my parts directly correlate to certain astrological signs, to certain astrological planets. Some of my, like, this is like how freaking amazing we are. This is how multifaceted that we are. And we have just begun. We are on the cusp of these amazing, amazing understandings and capabilities within ourselves. So it proves that we are meant to have parts, and that multiplicity is not madness. It's human. And so if modern therapy has already accepted this, then why has it turned away from the original mirror it came from, which is MPD not being a mistake? It's a reflection of what IFS is only just beginning to normalize. And it's time to stop acting like we evolved out of MPD or out of any diagnoses and start recognizing that we evolved deeper into it through systems like IFS that are, ironically, its proof of existence. And so I feel like there's a little disconnect in this episode because schizophrenia doesn't wrap into DID and MPD as much as those two wrap into each other. But in my experience, it does. And then I feel like if I was to wrap them all three into a weave perfectly, that it would outreach to other stuff that then we would just be down a rabbit hole forever. And so I'm going to bring the focus to schizophrenia, but I want you to know that I kind of feel this disconnect, and I feel it will reveal itself like as we move through the episode as well as in future episodes. So bringing schizophrenia into this picture, because this is the thread that weaves this podcast episode together, and it's the one really that's most often misunderstood and really feared. I mean, I wasn't scared of an MPD diagnosis for some reason, but I was terrified of a schizophrenic diagnosis. And if D&D, or DID, I'm sorry, not D&D, I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, but it's a cool game. So if DID and MPD are trauma's way of splitting us inward, then schizophrenia could be what happens when the boundaries between inner and the outer collapse altogether. So when the psyche becomes so raw, so porous, that it begins pulling in content from other timelines, other versions of reality, and even other lives. I believe schizophrenia in its most spiritual form is a sign that someone's psyche has been cracked wide open, whether it be by trauma, by spiritual activation, by karma, by soul contracts, by astrological positioning, whatever it may be. All of it, none of it, both. And in that cracking, a portal opens. And through that portal, images, archetypes, memories, and even entire stories begin pouring in. Some may be from parallel versions of themselves. Others may be from ancestral memory, and others from the collective unconscious or soul contracts that we don't have a current logical, put that in air quotes, understanding of. And there's also a sacred theory that I uncovered long ago that, and I hold it with deep, deep, deep respect, that schizophrenia may not just be one soul fracturing. Schizophrenia could actually be an indication of multiple souls or entities, and a soul is an entity in itself, inhabiting one single vessel. A shared incarnation. One that's maybe through multiple dimensions, one's that's maybe through multiple timelines, right? Like a body with more than one stream of karmic consciousness weaving through it. And sometimes these souls are fragmented aspects of one origin. Other times, they are entirely distinct beings with overlapping timelines and lessons converging in the same human form. Because let's face it, if we really, truly have faith that everything happens for a reason, if we really were to sit down with that question and say, do you actually believe that everything happens for a reason? But then you try to say, well, that person shouldn't have died, or they shouldn't have to suffer like that, or they shouldn't have to live that way. Like, you're going against the grain of your own spoken belief system. And so I believe that all of these diagnoses, I believe every diagnosis exists for a reason. And I believe it's a spiritual reason. And I believe it's here to enhance our livelihood so we can understand alchemy and the age of spirituality and magic that we are going into. And so when this overlapping of timelines and lessons converge in the same human form, the voices aren't necessarily hallucinations, even though that's what we label them as. They are actual conversations. The thoughts stop being delusions, and they maybe become negotiations. And the chaos isn't dysfunction. It's an overlapping symphony of identities, each trying to be seen, each trying to be felt, each trying to be healed and released. This might sound far out to some, but I ask you to think for a second of how many writers, authors, right? Like download storylines that we have this deep resonance with, right? Like Harry Potter, right? Like Divergent, Hunger Games, like we have a deep resonance. What about The Simpsons, right? Like The Simpsons have been proving the future for like eons now. So if they can get these messages in a sound way, in a seamless way that maybe they don't even realize they're receiving them, until after in retrospect, how can some, maybe others, receive them in such a full frontal and brutal way that they don't even know or get to experience it in the seamless way? So what I'm saying is, writers, mystics, healers, they speak and they channel characters, spirits, ancestors, and aspects of our higher selves. The books, the music, the scripts, they come from people, and they come from another place outside of Earth. And our world accepts the stories that are downloaded and archetypes and ideas that come from beyond. So what if schizophrenia is a form of channeling, maybe without a filter, one that we don't understand yet, one that's unrecognized and hasn't yet been defined to be understood? My own experience was not something to be understood until I made it through it. And what if the mind that holds it all has become so open, so multidimensionally attuned, that it's tuning into more than just a singular self? Because mine led me on paths my former self would have never walked. Like I had to walk through all of these symptoms to be able to get where I am now and gain any shred of distinct understanding about my mind breaking and splitting open. Because that occurred outside of me as well as internally. And so what if that's the key, right? Is to walk through every diagnosis and find an end to it, instead of just accepting that people are how they are and there's no changing it, and we medicate and we leave them at that. Because these experiences for people that haven't made it through them are painful. They're confusing. They're overwhelming. They can make the world feel completely unsafe. And this can be because the veil is thin and the boundaries are unstable. And that doesn't make the experience or the whatever we want to call it wrong. It makes it sacred. It makes it something we need to understand, not pathologize. So maybe schizophrenia isn't a glitch in the system. Maybe it's a portal. And the voices we fear are simply aspects of truth that we're not yet ready to hear. And I'll say it again, because somewhere in that madness is a message. And someone somewhere is finally ready to listen. And I know if I was willing to listen, that means others will be and are too. We are the changes we wish to see in this world, downloading that hermetic frequency to make the earth and humanity anew. So this is where I believe the real truth lies. The 3 diagnoses that I have spoke of today are all 3 branches of the same tree. Everything is right. We're just tapping further into that knowledge within the tree. And the tree of knowledge and life are allowing us to see further into it. It's like peeling itself back, inviting us in. It's opening up to us so that we can gain a deeper understanding. An understanding that any tree that experiences trauma, programming, whatever it may be, is rooted in trauma. Watered by suppression, shaped by sensitivity, and the kind of branches that form, whether it's DID, MPD, like symptoms, or schizophrenia, or maybe even other diagnoses that I haven't touched on in this episode today, depends on how strong the root was, how spiritual the soil is, and how violently the storm came. There's a widespread assumption that DID or fragmentation only occurs in early childhood. And yes, that may be true in a majority of cases. But to stop there is to miss something essential. We don't live a linear universe. We don't live in a linear universe. We don't live in a finite mind. So to encapsulate such a complex expression of the psyche into a single clinical timeline is to exclude unknown variables. And the unknown is where transformation lives. The unknown is where alchemy is, where mysticism is, where the untangible is. And that is what we have to trust. That is what we know exists. That is why we are here. And this is often the shortcoming of modern day psychology. This is what they are missing. They still, modern psychology still resists working with energy, consciousness, the ether as valid elements, or telepathy. It ignores the unseen, the non-physical. It ignores the soul, right? Like, the medical system should be connected in all layers. You should never be treating one physical or mental illness separately from another physical or mental doctor, right? Like blood pressure being intertwined with mental illness. Like, they are separate. And they have been treated as separate. And they need to converge together. And that will eventually lead us to what Nikola Tesla once said. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. 1 decade. That's all it would take to quantum leap This, to me, is the greatest divide between modern psychology, medication-based, behavior-focused, and what I call mystic psychology, right? Like I touched on this earlier, and this is really kind of what I want to start to close out with, is that mystic psychology honors the alchemical structure of the mind. It includes telepathy, soul memory, energetic timelines, and deep spiritual transmutation. It recognizes that how you think affects disease in the body, affects what you intake, absorb, and create, and what you release and output and heal. It recognizes that voices aren't always hallucinations, they're messages. That parts aren't disorders, they are divine archetypes trying to return home. Now, let me be clear. That's not to say modern medicine has no place. It absolutely does. Medications can 100% save lives. They can stabilize the nervous system and open a path toward healing. For many, they are a vital bridge, or they can be, and I honor that because I have seen people walk that path, and it is a beautiful path. But we're not here to talk in binaries necessarily. We're here to explore the whole spectrum. And with that said, I'm going to kind of revert back to what we were exploring before. So what about those of us who made it to our teens or 20s with a relatively stable sense of self, only to have trauma shatter the foundation? Because, I mean, my childhood, other than deep ingrained programming, was lovely. It was beautiful. At least I thought it was. And my system didn't seem to be born from dysfunction. Like, the programming is dysfunctional in its own, but I didn't have to learn to live in survival in my childhood. I was reshaped by survival after the first decade of my life. When trauma hits a fully formed identity, it doesn't just split the present. It splits your past. It fractures the narrative. Suddenly you're questioning who you were, who you are, and whether you were ever real to begin with. And sometimes that's how MPD symptoms can arise, right? Like, that are more, because it's interesting, like MPD as a diagnosis, but also MPD as a reality, right? Like, we all have different personalities. We all have multiple personalities, y'all. And it's not that they arise or start getting louder from a lack of identity, but it's from too much identity, maybe, forced into too small of a container. And what saved me, what rebuilt me piece by piece, was the fact that all of these things I've spoke on today are not disorders. They are equations. They are systems the psyche creates to survive unbearable experiences. And if we decode them, if we approach them with reverence, we can absolutely 100% transmute them. Each of them is a map, a survival code, a divine equation designed to protect the soul when the world failed to. The voices, the parts, the time loss, these are not signs that something is wrong, even though it's an indication that there is something going on. They are signs that something deep inside you still knows how to protect you. And that is sacred. So to the listener, to the seer, to the survivor, if you've experienced these states or even found yourself resonating without a diagnosis, hear this. You are never broken. You are layered. You are not crazy. You are complex. You are your own daggone universe. A multidimensional being. And your system did not fail. It adapted. Your soul, it did not shatter. It restructured itself to carry you through. Healing isn't about erasing parts of you. It's about welcoming them in, listening to them, not silencing the voices, but integrating their wisdom, not escaping the chaos, but learning to translate it. Because you are not the disorder or any disorder. You are the one who survived the chaos, the trauma, the pain, the programming, all the things that the density of this human experience threw at you to separate you from yourself so you could remember once again who you really are. A divine, sovereign creatrix of a being. Survival mode is sacred. And we don't quite give it enough credit yet. And because that is so, we are going to close this episode out with a beautiful healing meditation to forgive, hold compassion, and tap into the wisdom of that survival mode, whatever it may be, that we tend to resist and have so much disposition for. So I ask you, your higher self asks you, allow this meditation to open your heart to every part of you. So every part of you may come to meet you and heal through your soul and its own profound healing energy. And so we're going to shift. And I know if you're driving, you're fine. I promise. I believe in meditation at all times. So, just focus on the road, but still listen and embody, because you can absolutely integrate everything no matter what you're doing. If you're working out, it does not matter. If you are in a safe place that you can absolutely take a seat and kind of just like relax. I want it to be completely ununiformed. Just feel comfortable. Just feel like yourself. Go limp and loose is what I was going to say, but we're going to go for a loop. Go loop. And I'm going to welcome you in to this closing meditation. Let your body just settle into whatever space is around you. Learn to let your jaw soften. Let your shoulders drop. Release that tension. And I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose. And hold it for just a moment. And slowly release through your mouth. And we're going to do that again. We're going to inhale deeply and hold before we exhale fully. Allow this breath to become your anchor. Each inhale is a remembering. Each hold is a clearing out, gathering it all together. And exhaling is a release. And now you're going to gently bring your awareness to a part of you that's always been in survival mode. The part that scans, the part that shields, the part that reacts before you even know why. Maybe it's in your chest, maybe your stomach, maybe it's scattered all around you. Wherever it is, just notice it. No judgment, only witness. This is not the enemy. This is the sacred survivor. And so we want to say gently to ourselves, you can say it aloud, in your heart, in your minds, or just receive the words from me to you in this moment. You did what you had to do. You kept me alive. You are not wrong. You are not broken. You are sacred. And let these words sink in, not just mentally, but cellularly. You are here in this moment with me, which means you made it. It means survival worked, even if it wasn't perfect, even if it came with some costs. Now, breathe into that knowing. And if you can safely do so, feel free, or if you feel like doing so, place your hand over your heart or anywhere that your body may call for it. And I'd like for you to speak or receive this softly within. I honor my survival system, and I give it permission to soften. It doesn't have to disappear. It just doesn't have to carry everything anymore. Let that truth ripple through your nervous system. Let it settle into your bones. Let it root into your soul. There is no shame in surviving, only awe. Because survival is sacred, and so are you. Now, let's take 3 more deep breaths to anchor in this integration. We're going to inhale and hold and exhale. Inhale, hold, and exhale. Last one, breathe in love, hold, and breathe out gentleness. You are safe now. You are whole enough now. And your healing can begin not by rejecting your survival, but by bowing to it. When you're ready, begin to return to the time and space that is the present. And remember, you were never broken. You are surviving. And as a sacred being, there is nothing about you or your experience that isn't sacred. Thanks, guys, for being here today. If this episode stirred something in you, if it opened a doorway, validated an experience, or helped you feel just a little less alone, I'm so grateful you were here for it. Thank you for walking this layered, complex, and sacred journey with me. As for next week's episode, not quite sure what it'll be just yet, and honestly, that's because this one is a hard act to follow. But trust, we'll get there, we'll do it. And whatever it is, it will be a pleasurable treat for your mind, your soul, and your evolution. In the meantime, be sure to keep an eye out for the meditation's singular release this Friday. Following this episode, I usually try to do at least an expanded version. I think this one I might go ahead and infuse some energy therapy in with it as well. And it'll be called The Sacred Survivor, a meditation to honor, soften, and integrate. And then there will be an actual energy therapy session separately that drops on Monday with no meditation after this episode, the Monday after this episode. And it will be designed to help deepen the healing that we explored today and further integrate everything we activated together. I can already feel that it's going to carry some powerful frequencies, just what's needed to help you rise to your next level. So until then, thank you for listening, thank you for surviving, and thank you for becoming exactly who you are. As always, keep speaking the truth your soul remembers. Namaste, and many, many, many blessings on your way.